Beatles. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of any more. I can't. Not at the moment. I need to look on my playlists for like unknown or less famous bands. Elton John, of course.
Oh yeah. Sorry, yeah.
Very famous. Did you watch his movie?
The movie, yeah.
No, I don't watch it.
With Tower Edison. Yeah.
Good?
The movie, yeah, is good.
Oh, that's not Elton John.
Okay, wow.
Did you know who this is?
Yeah. Lollipop.
Dua Lipa, very famous. Do you know where she is British? But do you know where she's from? Her family is from?
No.
No.
Have you heard of Kosovo? Near Serbia? Balkans? No. Her family is Kosovan Albanian.
Okay, yeah, I get it.
Okay.
I don't know much about it, so.
Yeah.
Now that is definitely.
Yeah,
of course.
I love I love that song.
Yeah?
Sharon, yeah.
I feel like in the UK, people don't like him, not because like as a person, but because he's so famous and his songs are always played that it's kind of songs. Yeah.
One Direction.
not very good at making songs, but I mean these guys were like the biggest boy band of their generation in the UK
I know.
as well.
Oh, interesting.
I think that these people from America. Oh my god. Because I don't listen music by
they were formed. There's a talent show in the UK called The X Factor.
The X Factor.
Was it?
The X Factor.
It was X Factor, which is like a music talent show, and they were formed in maybe like 2006 on that. So they met, and then that's how they became famous.
I know him.
How he's done.
Lion, Harry, Lois.
That's Zayn Malik.
Zayn
Malik. He's made like songs of his own as well. Since they split up. Amazing. What amazing singer, of course. Tom Jones.
Well, I see the voice.
Yes, he's Welsh, a Welsh singer. He's a judge on another talent show called The Voice.
Okay.
Yeah, but he's very deep, like baritone, like very distinctive singing voice. And then maybe 80s he was really big. So really good songs as well. Who else have we got? Is that the last one? That is the last one. What other UK bands can you think of? It's like what that come to mind?
British.
Come on, you say that one. Not greatest, just any.
I said my bands here.
The Guns N' Roses.
Guns N' Roses.
Yeah. What other?
What?
Fifth Harmony. Fifth Harmony is the Guns N' Roses. But I don't know. It's British.
No, really? Oh my
It's
God.
British? No, yeah. I don't know.
American.
Yeah.
Other bands. Pentatonics is a group, but they're not a British.
Radiohead.
Radiohead.
Yeah.
Good songs.
Is it okay?
It's British. Yeah. I think they're from. I don't know where they're from actually.
They are so good.
Yeah, I've got two of their songs here. Oasis. You know Oasis? Oasis and Blur. Have you listened to Blur as well? Or?
Blur, yeah.
Very, very big in the 90s. That was like, it was called, what was it called? Britpop? Britpop, and you had Oasis and Blur, and they were like the two biggest bands at that time. Dead Bowie, cool. A lot of stuff from Oasis actually. Pink Floyd. The Kinks.
The Kinks. Yeah, I think.
You know the Kinks?
Gorillaz is from UK? No.
I don't know.
I think Gorillaz.
Gorillas.
How do you say it?
Gorillas.
Oh, the Gorillas. Yeah, of course. Because they were formed, so the lead singer for the Gorillas was also the lead singer from Blur.
Yeah,
so he left Blur and he started.
It's the same singer.
That's very good as well. What else have I got on here?
British.
I really like what goes on here. think that's it that I've got on my playlist. Can you think of any others? Any other British bands?
But no. British. Busquemos a ver.
I don't know, like jazz as well, jazz and you know what? I'm really bad with music. I have my songs that I listen to.
I know.
I'm not like I listen to like the songs that I like, and outside of that, it's I don't know. So I'm sure I've missed loads of really famous who deserve to be on this list, but unfortunately, I'm a bit.
But it's rock too. For your parents listen to rock too.
My dad listens to rock as well.
For the 80s and other type of music.
Yeah, but not just rock.
Just rock.
Not just
rock.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, loads of stuff they listen to. Okie dokie. That was music. History.
Okay.
Are you interested in history?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I got the history. Yeah.
Okay. So this is, I think. Did you do the politics one? I did. That was.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And the same order.
Yeah.
Of the same.
That was quite a lot of text. So there's very little text here.
Okay.
So don't worry about reading. I will talk rather than.
Okay.
It's easier, I think.
Okay.
So British history.
Let's see.
This is. I don't know what's here. I just found this picture on the internet. These 3 lions, they are lions, I promise. You see these like a very famous symbol of of England in particular, like the 3 lions. For example, on the football team, like the badge is like 3 lions, like these types of lions.
Okay.
I don't know why they're lions. There are no lions in the UK. There were no lions in Europe. I don't know why, but they chose the lions.
Okay.
This is the first one because before this, it's kind of like it's hard to tell.
Oh,
yeah.
Roman conquest?
This is the Roman conquest. Like 40. Do you know what AD means?
Yeah.
Huh? Yes.
Before, no.
After Jesus Christ. I don't know. Well,
it's Latin.
After, después de Cristo.
Sí, después de Cristo.
But in Latin, no, it's Latin. It's Anno Domini.
Yeah.
Year of our Lord, basically.
Because the other is AC, but this AD, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Anno.
Anno.
It's Latin, so you don't need to really. Anno Domini.
okay.
What is it? Annus Domini. Annus means year. Year, and Domini means of our Lord. So year of our Lord, basically, because it's like a Christian calendar. So.
Okay.
And then in the other one, do you know what the other? If it's before 0, do you know what it in English? How you say it?
No.
BC, before Christ.
DC.
BC, before.
Yeah.
But also,
Morse.
you look like, because this is like a religious thing. A lot of, because I did history, so a lot of like academics will say CE, and CE means Common Era.
Okay.
And then BC will be BCE, before Common Era.
Okay.
So kind of to make it more and to remove the religious aspect, they change. It's exactly the same. The years are all the same. It's just
Okay.
So
very interesting.
Yeah, this is the Roman conquest. This is like obviously extremely important. This wasn't the first time. So about I think 100 years before, Julius Caesar. You know who you've heard of him? Julius Caesar.
Caesar.
Have you heard of Julius Caesar?
No.
Really?
Tell me more.
He was the guy. He was first emperor. Well, not really. He was the Roman leader, and he was stabbed in the back. And then Shakespeare made a play about him about 1,000 years later.
Show me a picture or something.
Yeah. I mean, he's a very important figure in European history, of course.
Okay. Okay, yeah. Julio César.
Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, how are you?
Yeah. The first for the pronunciation. Yeah.
You know who he is. I have to go. I was a bit worried. If you didn't know who Julius Caesar was, this might Julius, because you don't say because Julius Caesar.
Caesar.
Yeah.
Julius
Because in the
Caesar.
UK, the J is a J. It's not
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
US.
Julius Caesar.
Yeah.
In Spanish, Julio César.
Julio Cesar. He's also a footballer, Julio Cesar.
Julio César.
He's played my team. We're doing history. We started off with music,
Okay.
and now we're going on to history. So we'll start again. What was
History.
I was just saying these lions. I promise they are lions. They don't look like lions. Like a very famous symbol of the UK, of England specifically.
Okay.
So the English football team has like a badge, and the badge is these 3 lions, for example.
Okay.
I don't know why. Starting off with Roman conquest. Do you know who Julius Caesar is?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Roman leader?
Was
Okay.
yes, I don't know, big leader.
Yeah.
In the past, well, even was a leader of Roman Empire.
Yes, exactly. But this isn't him. So about 100 years before this, Julius Caesar tried to take over the UK and he kind of failed. But they succeeded this time. So this started, I think it's about maybe 100 years of Roman rule. That's so hard. Roman rule in Britain. So very important development. They brought a lot of, roads. A lot of roads in the UK date back to this time originally, because they're straight. The saying about Roman roads is they're always very straight. They don't really go like this. They're just like that. What else to say? They didn't invade the whole of the UK. They kind of got up to basically where the border now is with Scotland, and then stopped. Because the Scottish tribes who were on the other side kind of fought back, and they weren't able to take over the whole of Scotland.
Okay.
And I don't think they went to Ireland either. It's obviously it's kind of the start of British history. Like in schools, you don't really learn about much before this. So Roman Britain is like where a lot of education about British history starts.
Okay.
Shortly after founding of London, these are some coins from London, I think, or made out of like gold or bronze from London. This is the map of London originally. If you remember on the London tour, the day we did London, I said that the city of London, that is like the oldest part. It's that basically. So that was the first foundations of London, and it's still the oldest part today. And I think it's still the same boundaries as it was then. Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Hadrian's Wall. Have you ever heard of Hadrian's?
Hadrian Wall.
Hadrian was a Roman emperor. This is a wall that basically went from kind of not quite where the border now is with Scotland. They went from the Irish Sea all the way across to the North Sea. So it was a barrier basically against the Scottish tribes. And it doesn't actually look that big here, but it was manned all the way across. So it was very big, and you can still see it today. There's some. Yeah, this is. I don't know when this photo was taken, but recently. So if you go up, like if you're going up to Scotland, you can stop off and you can see the wall is still there in a lot of places.
How long is it? Do you know?
I can show you on a map. It basically spans like the whole width of the UK. But it's at the narrowest point, more or less. Yeah, so it kind of went from here to here. So it went pretty much the whole way across, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
I can just find it. Yeah, there you are. So that's Hadrian's Wall, and then they built a second one further up as well. Yeah, just to stop the nasty Scots from getting it. I don't blame them. Yeah, that's one of the most famous kind of relics or leftover places that you can visit that survived from the Roman era. There's also a city in the southwest called Bath. Bath is the name for a bath as well, but they have like thermal baths there, kind of like a Copanuco, I guess. But those were that's why they're called baths. It was named after the city. And during the Roman times, they built a lot of them, and they used it as like a pleasure, like resort, basically, like for like going on holiday.
Looks small, right? Yeah.
The hall,
Yeah.
it is quite small, but there would be people there to guard, so it wasn't yet. This is kind of after the Romans left. So the Romans left maybe like 50 years before this, and so at that point, the people who lived there were Britons, called Britons. They were like Celtic, so they spoke Celtic languages, like Welsh nowadays is a Celtic language, Irish as well. They spoke languages like that, but around this time, people from Germany and Denmark and also Scandinavia started to migrate to the UK. And slowly they pushed the Britons back to Scotland, Wales, and kind of down here as well to Cornwall. Like this southwest area as well. So that's the reason why English is a Germanic language, is because they came over from Germany. Yeah. And there's also French influences, because as we'll see in a moment, there were French invasions as well. So English is a real compass. Lots of different Latin, French, German, not so much Celtic, but because they mostly got killed or pushed away. That's kind of 5th century, and you can see the areas they can. So Anglo-Saxon is like a common term to use sometimes when referring to white people in the UK. Is Anglo-Saxon, because Anglo. Where is Anglia? This is Anglia here, and this is Saxony. Saxony is an area of Germany, but Anglo-Saxon is like the two of them together. Unfortunately, it's also been used kind of, not stolen, but taken by some far-right groups, some race, kind of like push racist kind of ideas about British identity, which is a bit ironic because they were immigrants. So. British history is really a history of varying like waves of immigration from different places. Viking period. I know a lot of people, like when we talked about British history, they like the Vikings, right? It's very, very famous. I kind of like put it all into one here because there's a lot to talk about. Basically, it started off the Viking presence in Britain started with raids. So they would raid monasteries. That monastery, this is a place called Lindisfarne, which is like here, I think. So if you think about it, so the Vikings came from Scandinavia, which on the map is like here. So they raided a lot along this coast here. But they also went around to Scotland, to Ireland, etc. But they raided monasteries, they took gold, they took loot, captives, hostages sometimes, or slaves.
But okay, the Vikings are from Scandinavia?
Yeah. So Norway, Denmark, and Sweden.
Okay.
Mostly Norway and Denmark. But then it kind of developed, and they started taking land as well. So instead of just like raiding, looting, and going back home, they started to kind of conquer territories, and they set up this area here, which is called the Danelaw. Danelaw, you can see it's written there. Danelaw, and it was the idea was basically it kind of split Britain in two like this diagonally. So this was Anglo-Saxon, and this was Viking, and that's the reason why in a lot of areas up here in the north you'll see names that have like Viking roots, and I don't actually know of any examples, but you can see like names like some names are different to names in the south, where there was like Anglo-Saxon, and the Danelaw, there was also something called the Danegeld, geld meaning gold. So rulers down here basically paid money to the Vikings to stop them from raiding and killing everyone. It was kind of like an agreement basically. They paid, in the UK you would say tribute. Tribute is like giving something up for tribute, and that was Danegeld. And then at one point, so eventually they were kind of driven back. So there was a king I think called Ethelred, which is like a really common Anglo-Saxon name, who was the first king of like a united England. Then the Vikings came back and they conquered the whole thing. And then it was called the North Sea Empire. It didn't last very long. There was one king who like ruled over England, Norway, Denmark, and Sweden as one. But eventually it collapsed and England became independent again. That's basically just the Viking period. It's like it started off as raids, then Danelaw, and then conquest of the whole thing. And they were pretty brutal. I mean, as you can see. And then 1066. This is a really, really, really famous event in British history. Have you ever heard of this?
Norman? No.
Norman? Have you heard of Normandy? Do you know anything about France?
No.
Normandy is an area in the north of France. I'll show you that.
Okay. Like Normandy. No.
Like the Normandy landings in World War
Normandy
II.
landing, right? Yeah. The famous place where the army UA. Yeah. Normandy.
So this is Normandy.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is Normandy here, and it was named Norman. So the Norman conquest comes from the Normans who lived in Normandy.
Okay.
I don't know whether they took whether they named the place after themselves or the other way around. I don't really know. But they were Vikings originally. So there was a TV show called Vikings recently. Has anyone watched it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a series, right?
Vikings.
It's a series.
It's a
sorry,
series,
it's a
but
series,
This is Viking.
I didn't see it.
The name.
So basically, just to give a bit of history, basically, Vikings came from Scandinavia and started to raid northern France, like they raided the UK, and they actually sailed. They sailed all the way down the River Seine, and all the way to Paris. So from here, all the way down to Paris, and looted the city, which is quite an achievement because it's quite a long way from the sea. And so the French king gave them Normandy in return for, not killing everyone, basically. So he said, I'll give you this land and you won't raid us anymore. And so they became sort of kind of vassals, kind of like under the French king, but also kind of separate. And then in 1066, a guy called William the Conqueror, who's really famous, really, really famous in British history, invaded England and won a battle, a place called Hastings, which is on the south coast. It's called the Battle of Hastings. And this is like a contemporary, it's called the Fire Tapestry. It's basically like a woven, what's the word you use? Not sewn. It's like a fabric. It's not like a painting. It's like a depiction of the battle in cloth, basically. It's very famous. It's somewhere in France. You can see the whole thing in France. And this is a scene where this guy is the King of England. This guy famously got no, maybe that's not him. Basically, he famously got shot in the eye by an arrow and died. And then the British won the battle. I think that might be him.
Like Medusa.
Yeah.
Like Medusa.
And so they won the battle, and William became King of England. And the first thing he did in London was build a big castle, because a lot of people were, they didn't speak. First of the Normans spoke French. The kind of Anglo-Saxon population spoke, I guess, early English, an early form of English. And so for a long time to come, there will be a distinction between the upper classes spoke French and the lower classes spoke English. And there was, it's kind of like a really interesting kind of balance, because for a long, long time, France was like the language of the royal family and of the court. So until even everywhere in Europe, even until really late, like the 19th century, France was like maybe the upper class, like the aristocratic language. Yeah. The same in the UK. And most kings in the medieval period didn't speak English at all. A lot of them were born in France. That's what, yeah. So good for one thing to remember is that. So when William the Conqueror took over England, conquered England, he also kept this part of France. So basically, England gained lands in France. And for a long time, England had lands here, they had lands down here, and they also had lands up here.
Oh,
yeah. That's more fetching. Yeah, really, really powerful. And there's an event later on that I'll talk about that kind of ended that. But that's it. Just remember, this is really important. This is like one of the big turning points in British history. This was the last successful invasion of the UK in 1066. This is kind of the start. This is the Anglo-Norman, so Anglo-Saxon Norman invasion of Ireland, and this was the first invasion of Ireland, and it started about 800 years of English rule in Ireland until the 1920s, which we'll talk about later. But I was talking to Thomas yesterday, Louise's boyfriend.
Yeah.
He's from Northern Ireland, and he identifies as Irish. So we were talking a lot last night about this stuff. So I felt I had to include Irish history in this as well, because it's very closely linked, and there was the English did a lot of very, very bad stuff in Ireland. A lot of forced resettlement, a lot of colonization, a lot of bad things. So you're aware.
Yeah.
Magna Carta. Have you heard of this, Magna Carta?
Yeah, but the other way.
Carta Magna?
Carta Magna.
Have you heard of it? Do you know what it is?
No, I really don't.
No, but you've heard of it.
But I heard about it, but I really don't know.
Maybe did any of you study law at any point? No.
No,
lawyers.
that.
No. If you studied law, maybe you would have heard of this. It's a document. It's basically. Huh? It's a very early.
Peace treatment, or
it's a very early constitution. Yeah. It wasn't really. Yeah, so it was an agreement between. This is a guy called King John, and these are his nobles. Do you know nobility? Does that mean? Do you understand what that means?
nobility.
Nobility.
Okay.
Nobles, and these are his nobles, and they basically forced him to sign this.
Okay.
So they would have some power in how the country was being run as well as him. So it wasn't democracy because the people they were still irrelevant. You know, it was just the nobles, but it was the first step towards kind of the system we have now of parliament and government. It's a really important event in legal history of the world as well. English conquest of Wales. I couldn't find any good pictures for this. This is a monument. There was a Welsh prince called Daffyd something, Laffet, I can't remember. But he was the last independent king of Wales, and then he was defeated, and England conquered Wales, and he eventually became king. Oh wait. Un cappuccino di Navidad? Sí. I saw it yesterday, so I want to try.
Espíritu navideño.
Ay, no.
Very.
¿Qué tiene? ¿Qué le echan de distinto?
Navidad.
Bien.
El árbol.
Pero si tiene algo especial. Bueno, también quiero más.
Eso.
Ya por ahora no, a rato. Gracias.
So this is just a monument to that last king of Wales, and ever since this, there was a Welsh revolt, maybe 200 years later. Apart from that, Wales has been under British control or English control for the whole time. At this point, it's wrong to say Britain or the UK because it didn't really exist. It was just England, because Wales was independent until this point. Scotland remained independent for a long, long time. So we should be saying England. I mess up sometimes.
But what is the shape? I mean, it's just a big stone, or
I think it's just a big stone. I don't know enough about this. Speaking of Scotland, first of all, Scottish independence is a slightly weird way to put it. So, has anyone watched Braveheart? Have you heard of Braveheart, the film? There's a film called Braveheart with a guy called Mel Gibson in it. Yeah, it's about this, I think. So in 1296, a king called Edward I invaded Scotland, and he was able to basically get the Scottish nobility together and get them to make him king. It didn't last for very long. A guy called William Wallace, I think, I really hope I'm getting this right, led a rebellion basically, and in 1328 he succeeded. There's a battle called the Battle of Bannockburn, which is quite famous, where the Scottish army defeated the English, and then they regained their independence. And it would take a long, maybe another 400 years, no, less than that actually, 200, 300 years for the two to become one again. 100 Years' War. We're talking about France. So at this point, basically, this was an attempt by the English king to become king of France as well. And so at this point, and it was really close actually. He almost did it. They almost did it. England had a lot of land in France. Maybe I can get you a map to show you. loads. It's not loading, is it? Here we are. Okay, it's quite small, I'm afraid. But what you see is the red is English territory, and the blue is French. So you can actually see that you got, as at one point they owned a lot of northern France, and this was this actually it wasn't 100 years, it was 116 years. This was like a really important war in European history. If the British had won this, English had won this rather, it'd be very different today, how things developed. But they didn't. Do you know who this woman is?
I think yes. I think so.
Her name?
In Spanish it's Juana de Arco, but
Joan of Arc. I think in French it's Jeanne d'Arc. Jeanne d'Arc. In English it's Joan of Arc. Joan would be the
Joan of Arc?
Yeah, very famous. She led the French forces against the British, against the English rather. And yeah, she was captured and burnt at the stake.
She was
a martyr.
She was from France?
She was French.
After fight in the English.
The English killed her.
Okay.
So I think do you know what burnt at the stake? So they set it on fire basically, which is very common punishment for witches at that time. So I think they did that to her. But she became a French hero, a French martyr, and she still is. And this is the Battle of Agincourt, which is a very famous battle which the English won between England and France. The Black Death, you've heard of this? Oh, this is it was called the bubonic plague. This is the most deadliest plague in human history. It killed about, I think, 40% of Europe in a year. Really, really massive impact on society in Europe as well, because traditionally the workers had very little power, but after this, they actually, because there were a lot fewer people, they actually had a lot more power to set wages, because you still needed jobs, but there were fewer people to do those jobs. That's just one impact of this. It killed a lot of people. This figure, or this costume, has become quite famous as well. And they put lavender in the end of their beaks and in their robes, because they thought the smell, because they believed that the plague was spread by through the air, basically, by smell. By making a nice smell, you wouldn't get the plague. And I think it actually worked, but not for the reason they thought it would. So I actually think there was something about it that worked, but I can't remember what. Wars of the Roses. Has anyone watched Game of Thrones? Game of Thrones? You've heard? Yeah, with But it's based on this. Yeah. So if I get a map of, sorry, I'll still keep leaving the. Yeah. Have you watched it?
Yeah.
No? Have you watched Game of Thrones?
No.
I haven't.
Basically, like two.
Show me maybe I don't know. Season.
So this is the map of the kind of the main country, I guess, in Game of Thrones. And if you look, it's actually very similar to the map of England.
Oh.
So the author, a guy called George R.R. Martin, of the books, because there's 7 books, based a lot of his stuff on English history. In particular, so the main plots of Game of Thrones are based on this, the War of the Roses, which was a civil war basically for control of the crown of the country. You had the House of York, House of Lancaster. Lancaster is a city.
Okay.
And you had the House of York was a white rose, and the House of Lancaster had a red rose as their symbol. So it became known as the War of the Roses. Yeah, so it became called the War of the Roses for that reason. It was settled in 1487. A guy called Henry Tudor. Have you heard of Henry VIII? The guy who had 6 wives, cut off all of their heads.
Yeah.
I think you've heard of him. He was that guy's father was the guy who ended the war, basically. So the beginning of the House of Tudor, very important period in British history, in English and British history. Just remember, Game of Thrones based on this, more or less. English Reformation. You heard of the Reformation? That's him, Henry VIII.
Fernando. No. right? Fernando is his name? No.
Henry, I don't know.
Enrique.
So he had 6 wives, and then,
Yeah.
like everyone learns about this in school. This is like the number one thing to learn about in. There's like a saying. It's divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. Is the way to remember what happened to the wives. Yeah, not big on women's rights at that point. This is an event. Well, I should explain. So he created the Anglican Church, which is basically the British Protestant church. So because the Pope wouldn't allow him to divorce his wife, he said, I'm going to create a new church where I can. And he did. This is about the time after Martin Luther. Have you heard of Martin Luther? Yeah. He led to Protestantism, and it was taken on in the UK. This is an event called the dissolution of the monasteries. Dissolution is from the verb dissolve. And basically all of the Catholic monasteries were dissolved. And they took all of the precious items, the gold, the relics, and took them to use for money.
Nicked them.
Yeah, nicked them, exactly. But they never gave them back. And technically it was legal. It was not illegal because the king said we could do it.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
I need to get my charger. So have a nice look at Henry VIII for like 50 minutes. You see how happy these guys are to be stealing the gold and silver.
Enrique.
Enrique.
¿Cómo están, chicas?
Bien, ¿tú?
¿Preparado para quemar velitas o no?
Sí.
Tal vez.
Tal vez.
Vea películas, es mejor.
Con este frío.
Sí, depende. Ojalá no llueva.
Pues ya llovió bastante.
Pues sí, ya llovió,
Ojalá
pero
que
sí.
ya.
No, yo no creo que ya. Hasta las 7 sale el sol.
Se las haciendo el arco iris. Bueno, pero sí, los dices por las velas. Si lo ves desde arriba, es como salían.
Sí.
Yeah, so thank you.
Y para ti, Oscar.
English Reformation, very important process. Even to nowadays, the monarch cannot be Catholic. So he or she has to be Protestant, Anglican, technically.
Okay.
And for a long time, it's a very big, important factor in Irish history as well, because a lot of Ireland was Catholic. For a long time, Catholics couldn't vote. They couldn't become, they couldn't be elected to be members of Parliament. They weren't allowed to practice their religion openly or in private. So there's a lot of restrictions on what they could do. Have I missed anything? No. So this guy's daughter. He had one son and 2 daughters. That was part of the reason why he kept divorcing his wives, was they didn't give him a son. The son died quite quickly. He became king, but he died, I don't know how long. One of the daughters, called Elizabeth, Elizabeth I, was very famous. She there's an event called the Spanish Armada. Basically, Spain sent a massive invasion fleet, which was destroyed in storms and by the English Navy. So she was kind of at the head of that, and she also persecuted Catholics a lot. So.
The King Charles is descendant from.
No, not direct. Basically, the English royal family changed a lot because for example, the House of Tudor ended because the final Queen Elizabeth, who I was talking about, didn't have any children. So instead, it passed to. Good, thank you for that. Passed to this man. This man who was from the House of Stuart, it was called, but very importantly, he was also King of Scotland. So he brought England and Scotland together, not by war, but by basically diplomacy with a sword. So he kind of created a union of the English and Scottish crowns. At that time, they were still separate countries, but they were ruled by the same person, and that continued until they became one country. And you can see here, this was kind of epitomised. This was the English rose, and this is the Scottish. It's called a thistle. It's the national plant of Scotland. Okay. So he put them together into one. This is the guy. It was James the First in England and James the Sixth in Scotland.
Okay.
James.
Okay.
Spanish.
James.
Diego James. Don James.
1607 was the first permanent colony in North America. Anyone know the name?
No.
Jamestown.
Oh, okay.
In Virginia.
Jamestown.
Jamestown in Virginia.
Yes,
And this was the first permanent colony. There was actually, I think about 15 years before, there was another colony called Roanoke, which has become quite famous because it disappeared. So all the colonists there. No, no, have you heard of it? Watched the video? There's a very...
on History Channel. Yeah, there's
So it's a place
a special chapter about it.
About Roanoke. It's called Roanoke, and basically the guy who settled it went back to England to try and get more money and supplies, and when he came back, they'd all vanished. Like no bodies. The colony was still there. No bodies. Nothing. There was like a writing on a tree, which is like a clue, but no, still nobody knows what happened to them. So it's like a very famous mystery. English Civil War is a this was basically a conflict between Parliament and the King. The King basically dissolved Parliament, saying, "I'm going to do what I want," and in response, they started a civil war. They're primarily by this guy. He's called Thomas Cromwell. So that he won the Civil War. It was called that you had the Cavaliers were the royal side, and the Roundheads were the Republican side. And it was one of the first wars where you had like use of guns, extensive use of guns, and the Roundheads, the Republicans, won and established a republic. It's also called the Commonwealth. I don't want to write that because it's a bit confusing. Because nowadays there's another thing called the Commonwealth, which is all of the like Canada, Australia, India. It's like a global network of English-speaking countries. It's unrelated. So he started this thing called the Commonwealth. The Republic, no king. It was led by him. He was basically a dictator, more or less. But like not in terms of how bad he was. It was just he ruled as a single person. So, but eventually he died. His son took over. Everyone hated him, and they invited the king back from France. So, or the king's son, because the king was executed during the Civil War.
Oh.
Next up is Great Fire of London. No, this is quite famous. I don't know how much of the city was destroyed, but a lot. Because London at that point, unlike a lot of cities in the Americas, which are planned, London developed as a city. So you had a lot of houses that were like really close together. So very unsafe conditions, and also very easy for fire to spread between houses. So the story is that this started in a bakery. And from there in a place called Pudding Lane, and from there it just spread and it destroyed a massive amount of the city, but it also gave the opportunity to redesign London. So a guy called Christopher Wren, who was an architect, he was hired to basically design a lot of big kind of monuments. St. Paul's Cathedral was designed by him after the fire, so London was basically redrawn in a lot of places because of this fire. And you can see everyone's trying to escape here and here. And we have written first-hand accounts, like diary records of this, from a guy called Samuel Pepys, who was like a very famous English writer. And I think he wrote about the kind of fleeing on these boats from the fire. It was really good fun. Acts of Union, in this act here is like a law. So act is another word for law, like legislation. Acts of Union, this was between England and Scotland. So if you remember, they had been ruled by the same monarch for a long time. This kind of formalised it, so they became one country. But it's still not called the United Kingdom yet. Jacobite rebellions. This has also inspired some stuff in Game of Thrones as well. Like some of the backstory, basically, to Game of the lore to Game of Thrones is based on this. This is a series of rebellions. So I missed out a slide here actually. Basically, if you're this guy, so the king was called Charles I. He was executed for being a tyrant. After this guy died, his son was invited back. He was called James II, I think. And he was, he was actually a Catholic, which is kind of what became quite controversial because a lot of the English kind of hierarchy was very, very, very strongly Protestant. And so there was a lot of disagreement, a lot of anger, and eventually he was overthrown. And they invited a Protestant monarch from Europe to come and take the crown, basically. It's called the Glorious Revolution. It wasn't really a revolution, there was no fighting. Basically, they came from the Netherlands with an army and the other kings.
Go ahead.
Fine. Pretty much. So basically,
Take it.
this was a series of attempts to put that king and his children back on the throne. So they went into exile in Europe, and then these are the Jacobite rebellions. Jacobite coming Jacob, which refers to the names of the kings, and they mostly started in Scotland, but they were all unsuccessful. And this was the last one. It's not a very big event. I mean, it's important to know, but it's not like a massive event.
Yeah, this side is Scotland, right?
Yes, and that side is
Because
got kilt.
yeah, what's the name?
Kilt.
Kilt.
It's like you know what a kilt is?
Kilt. Yeah.
Kilties?
A kilt.
It's like
It's like a skirt, basically.
like a dress.
Yeah, a skirt. Well, no, it's a dress like
A
body.
skirt, yeah.
It's like a very Scottish, very famous Scottish clothing.
Scared. Yeah.
Also in Scotland, this is a very controversial, another example of when we did some pretty bad things. So the Highlands is the name for an area of Scotland that's like very rural. At this point, there were people living on it, but they were forcibly cleared out of their houses because landowners wanted to put sheep there. So they were kicked out and they were forced out there. It's very, very controversial to this day. A lot of similar things were done in Ireland, with like forcing people to move or taking over their land, basically stealing their land. And this is what this was. And you can see they were leaving. 1801, creation of the UK. So there was a rebellion a few years before in Ireland, and as a result, the rebellion failed. But as a result, Ireland ceased to be kind of independent, or semi-independent, and they decided to create one country. And this is where the UK was created. At that point, it was the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, not Northern Ireland, because they still owned the entirety of Ireland. And you can see here is how the flag was made. So England, Scotland becomes this, and then England, Scotland, and this is the kind of the cross of Ireland becomes Union Jack, which is the flag we have today. Napoleonic Wars. Have you seen the new Napoleon movie?
No, I didn't see.
No. These are two famous, but I mean, this is quite an English point of view. This is the Battle of Trafalgar, which is a very famous naval battle, which the English won, and it stopped Napoleon's plan to invade England or invade the UK by sea, which is the only way you can invade the UK. And this is the Battle of Waterloo. Have you heard of the Battle of Waterloo?
Yeah.
It's Napoleon's last battle. He was defeated by the England, the British, and the Prussians. Prussia is a place in Germany. And this is quite like an English point of view, because these are very two battles for England. Very, very famous naval battle, very famous land battle.
Is Napoleon the name?
Oh no, Napoleon. So yes, Napoleonic Wars, because he started all of them. Well, not really. But Irish potato famine. Have you heard of this? This is a really, really important event in Irish history. Basically, there was at this point, Ireland was very, very dependent on growing potatoes for food, also to sell, but mainly for food. So a lot of Irish diet was very heavily based on potatoes. There was a massive potato famine. You know, a famine.
Yeah.
Do you understand? It's like hunger. But there was a potato disease, basically, called blight, which killed a lot of potatoes in the ground. So it was very hard to grow potatoes, and so a lot of people starved and died. And this is a really, really important event in Irish history because it caused a lot of anger. at the British, and it still does, because they felt with some justification that the British government did not help Ireland, did not help to provide it with food or to, or do anything to try and alleviate or to help with the suffering. A lot of Irish people left, emigrated out of Ireland, which is why there was such a big Irish population in the United States. It's because they were all not running away is a very poor way to put it, they were all fleeing from the famine. So this period is when a lot of Irish people emigrated to the US because of this. And it's also why a lot of the Irish population in the US tends to be very anti-British and also very pro-IRA, if you know what the IRA is. Yeah, related to this. A lot of anger justified anger about this. Jumping forward a bit, the suffragettes were a political campaign for the women's vote, basically. So they did a lot of... They're well remembered today. This is a woman called Emmeline Pankhurst, and I think her daughters were very prominent leaders of this movement. They become national heroes because of their work. They were successful in pressuring for the women's vote. They did also carry out bomb attacks and arson attacks to try and pressure as like a form of violence, but there were also famous non-violent protests. So they would chain themselves to railings, like outside of the House of Parliament, for example. They would go on hunger strikes. One of them threw herself under a horse like a racing horse at a place called Ascot. The king was attending, so she wanted to make a demonstration. So she kind of jumped onto the race course and died. She was hit by a horse and was killed. It's a very kind of famous event in the suffragette movement. But they were successful. They stopped their campaign because of, do you know what happened in 1914?
1914,
First World War. So they ended their campaign because of the First World War. But in 1918, at the end of the First World War, their campaign was successful. There was a law giving women a vote. World War I. Really, really. Awful. Obviously, have you watched? There's a movie that came out recently, a German movie called All Quiet on the Western Front. If you haven't watched it, I would. It's one of the most depressing films I've ever seen, but it's really, really good. World War I. I don't know how much do people know about World War I here in Colombia? About the First World War.
Yeah, I don't know. In the video that I heard, that was one of the more bloody.
Yeah, it was one of the most bloody wars ever. It's hard to because all war was in the what's the name of this? Trenches.
Trenches.
Yeah, it's hard to over-exaggerate how awful this war was. A lot of people died. In one Battle of the Somme, about 1 million people died in that battle, I think. And the conditions were awful, and because there's conscription, everyone aged, I don't know, my age, maybe 18 to, maybe 16 to, 40, was conscripted and sent off to the war. A lot of people felt pressure to volunteer as well. It's got a very big place in kind of British, how you say that, the zeitgeist, like British kind of national identity, national understanding. There's an event called Remembrance Day, the 11th of November, which was the final day of this war. 11th of November 1918 is a not national holiday, but a national day of remembrance in the UK for victims of this war and all wars as well.
The countries were Germany and Ottoman Kingdom?
Germany and Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary was Austria and Hungary. Yeah. Were
England.
And against them were,
against France,
UK, France, Russia.
United States, not right?
Not the US, yes, but only later. But they did give a lot of money and supplies to the Allies.
Yeah, I read a history about that. I'm not sure about what day was, but was like a treatment in between.
Say again?
Treatment Yeah, treatment.
Yes.
Between I don't know, Germany,
It was Germany,
yeah.
Austria-Hungary, and the Ottoman Empire. So do you know what the
but-
Ottoman Empire is? It's Turkey nowadays, basically.
Yeah, but I heard that in a specific day, both sides played soccer during the war.
Oh yes, that's very.
¿Quién tiene un 9 de 10? Me parece un momentico. ¿Quiénes son los de Oscar? Billete 10.
¿Qué?
Billete.
10 lucas.
Ah, no, ya no. Oscar, tengo. Ángeles.
Yes, so there was a very famous event where the French, German, so the French and English on one, British on one side, and the Germans on the other. It was on Christmas Day actually. So it was called the Christmas Truce in 1914. Christmas 1914. They came out of their trenches. They played football, and they.
Yeah, it is a movie.
Yeah.
Like, is
Yeah,
there
there was a
other
movie, it's
movie
called
that
Anna,
not
yeah.
is like you recommend it? Or the same?
It's a different movie.
It's the
Yeah,
different
yeah.
movie. Yeah, I saw the
Yeah,
movie.
they played
but
football,
I
they-
don't remember the name.
You know, they sang songs. They drank. You know, they drank together, and it,
That's crazy.
but unfortunately, it never. The like leaders heard out about this and banned it. They banned it basically like, that from happening again. What's really awful is so there was a saying in kind of the trenches where it will all be over by Christmas. There was this belief that this was going to be a very short war, because before this, wars were generally fought like battles were like short, so they were fought on like fields. You know, you'd have a battle maybe 3 days, it would be over and it'd move on. But because of the advance in technology, both sides basically just dug in. So these trenches, basically the lines did not move for about 4 years. So it was yeah. If you're watching it's still in. There's a part of northeastern France and Belgium where this war took place, and every year they still the farmers when they're like how do you say ploughing the fields, like with their machines they're turning over to plant stuff. They still find bullets, shells, guns in there. For a long time, people couldn't live there because there was so much unexploded, so many unexploded shells and bombs that it was just uninhabitable. It basically turned most of northeastern France into a graveyard for 100 years. Really awful. I've been there. If you do go to France, I'd recommend you can do tours of the battlefield, and you can find yourself. You're walking through fields, and you look down, and you can find a bullet. Not put there by anyone. No, not intentionally. Just a bullet. It was awful. 1921, Southern Ireland becomes independent. Very important. So, how much do you know about Irish history?
Irish history.
Not much.
Not much.
Okay, there's two. In Ireland, and especially in Northern Ireland, you have Catholics and Protestant. This isn't really about religion, it's more about social. You're either Catholic or Protestant, even if you're not religious. It's like an identity. That's because Ireland was originally Catholic, and when English, and especially Scottish settlers or colonisers came in, they were wealthy, they were Protestant, like you said, they took land, and they caused a lot of tension between the two groups. Northern Ireland, with what is now Northern Ireland, was traditionally or had a very big Protestant population. So when Southern Ireland became independent from the UK, they stayed behind. They chose to stay behind because they felt more closer to the UK than to the Catholic Irish. That's the reason why you have Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. It's also the reason why we'll talk about the Troubles. The violence in Northern Ireland is based on the same thing. It's Catholics, Catholic Republicans who want to become part of Ireland, and Protestant Unionists who want to stay in the UK. But Southern Ireland became independent. Originally it was like a dominion, so kind of semi-attached to the UK, but eventually it left completely. And this is a funeral march of a guy called Thomas Collins, who was an Irish revolutionary, basically. World War II, doesn't need much explaining. This was the Blitz. I think we talked about this. Did I show you the map of the bombs that fell on London?
Yeah.
Yeah, incredible. This is just one photo. I think this is somewhere in East. Yeah, this is I think Greenwich, and this is somewhere in East London. A massive amount of number of bombs were dropped on London and on the rest of the UK. A lot of civilians died, unfortunately, but yeah, that's wrong. That should be 1945.
45.
Sorry, I didn't see that. Yeah, not much to say about World War II. It's very famous, so. But it's very important still. In the UK, there's a term, the Blitz spirit, is like that kind of spirit in the face of danger and adversity and threats. You stand strong, stiff upper lip, and you kind of, I don't know how to explain that. It's like standing strong in the face of adversity. Do you know what that means? Adversity is like opposition. So even when someone's bombing you, when they're you're under threat, you still stand strong, basically. A lot of people hid in tube shelters, in subway shelters during the war. So a lot of photos of people, like when air raid sirens went off, they would go down into the tube, basically, because it was underground, so it was protected. Last one is the Troubles. This is still very, very controversial in the UK. Do you know anything about this?
The Troubles?
No. The Troubles is the name for basically a 30-year period of violence in Northern Ireland. Between, between, if you ever talk to Thomas about this, the Troubles is what it's called. Between Catholic, some would call them terrorists. I'm going to be neutral and call them paramilitaries, who wanted basically Northern Ireland to be joined with the rest of Ireland and be independent from the UK. And they were opposed by the British Army and by groups such as the UVF, which were unionists, so pro-UK paramilitaries. And a lot of violence. The IRA were the main Republican movement. They planted a lot of bombs. There were a lot of really awful stuff was done by both sides. There was an event called Bloody Sunday, when the British Army opened fire on protesters, killed a lot of innocent civilians. There were also bombs planted by the IRA in London, for example, and which also killed a lot of civilians. Because when you plant a bomb, you don't know, it's indiscriminate. It kills whoever it kills. It's not targeted. I think this is in Belfast. This is the British Army. You can still, if you go to Belfast, if you're going to the UK, I'd recommend you go to Belfast. It's a really, really interesting city. It's actually segregated. There is a wall between the Irish community and the main Irish community and the main Protestant community. There's still a wall, literal wall separating them, and there are gates that close at night, so you can't pass between them at night. There's a really, really interesting city. This is a man called Bobby Sands, who was an Irish Republican activist. He was imprisoned because at that point there were laws passed that the British Army could arrest you and put you in prison without trial and without evidence of any illegal activity or any connection to the IRA. I believe he was one of those men. While he was in prison, he was elected as an MP, like as a protest. He was elected as an MP for Northern Ireland, but he actually died in prison because he went on a hunger strike. You know what that means, a hunger strike? It was where you refused to eat. You refused to eat as an act of protest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he did that in prison, and even though eventually he was taken to hospital, he died. So he became a martyr, like a real martyr hero for the Irish Republican community. It was really awful. I mean, this was so 1996, 1998. In 1998, they signed something called the Good Friday Agreement, which formed the basis for the modern Northern Ireland. But my parents were alive during this time, so they were growing up during this time, and they had to be careful. My dad was living in London of bombs. The reason why there were no bins, like waste bins. Yeah, like if you go walk around London, there are no bins in the streets because the IRA would put bombs in them, so they took away all the bins. My mum was actually here in Popayán in Colombia about 30 years ago, so maybe in the 1990s. When Pablo Escobar was still alive and it was still considered very dangerous. So my grandparents told her, you shouldn't go, it's really dangerous. So she arrived in Bogota and she opened up the newspaper and an IRA bomb had hit her office in London. So she arrived in Colombia, this dangerous country, back in London, there was a bomb near her office. So it just goes to show,
It's ironic.
Yeah, it's ironic in a way,
Yeah,
God,
it's not good.
But it was, this is a very important moment in modern British history. And that's the last one.
I remember one song, the Cranberries. It's about the troubles.
Mhm.
Do you know?
The Cranberries?
The
Yeah.
Cranberries is a band.
It's a band,
and he saw some like a zombie.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is
Okay.
all about
Okay.
the troubles.
Yeah.
Maybe they are from there.
Yeah. Any questions about any of that?
It's almost-
Not just that, but all of it. Any questions?
I read a history about one king of England stole a stone, you know,
From Scotland?
Yeah, from Scotland. Yeah.
So there's a stone, it's called the Stone of Scone, which is meant to be this very famous, really important stone in Scottish history because it was used in building something. It was taken to London. It was used in the coronation. So when monarchs were crowned, it was used to part of the process. I think they might have sat on it or something. I don't know, or maybe it's at their feet. So it's very important. It was it was taken and it's now back in Edinburgh. But I remember some Scottish students, like university students, actually tried to steal this. So they came all the way down to England. They broke into, I think it's Westminster Abbey. Westminster Abbey, and they stole it. And I actually think they almost managed to get it back to Scotland. Where was it? Yeah, here you are. Yeah, in 1950, they took it and they actually broke it.
Oh.
They broke the stone in two, but they did manage to get it all the way back to Edinburgh. And then I think they, and then the police got it back. But it's quite fun. Where did you read about that?
I'm not sure. I think it was on the page, the internet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions about British? There's a lot of British history. It's a long history.
Long history, right? In which moment England invade India? No.
Oh yes, that's a good question. I think you're protected apparently. That's good. I think it was in the 18th century. So around 1750, there was a big war between England. Well, pretty much all of the countries in Europe got involved. It's called the 30 Years' War. And it basically decided France versus England, who was going to be the major power, the major imperial power of the top. Skeletons in the closet, so you can say some dark sides to what he did.
There's a famous phrase. Yes, Winston Churchill said that without India, England is just a poor country. Mm-hmm. I don't know why.
Yeah,
he said that, but
Well,
actually,
he probably did believe it because a lot of money came from India, so there was a lot of value in the stuff they produced, the goods they produced. I mean, do you know about the opium?
Yeah.
Opium came from India. So when they sold it to China during the Opium Wars, the opium was produced in India. India was a massive country. It's kind of called I think it's called the jewel in the British crown. So it was like the shining jewel of the UK, of the British Empire. Yeah, and it brought a lot of money, but at the cost of a lot of lives and depression. So yeah, it's hard to defend that sort of behaviour. I don't think you should.
Sure. There's another monument like Stonehenge.
Like a pre-Roman one?
I mean a monument like this with a mystery.
There is a mystery about this because they don't know where the rocks came from.
Yeah.
They think they came from Wales, which is actually quite a long way away from where this was built. So they moved the rocks a long way, and we don't really know why. Why they didn't just get them closer, for example. So there are mysteries about Stonehenge still. It's very popular, like on the summer solstice, on the longest day of that year. People come here to celebrate, basically.
Yeah.
Oscar, can you repeat me when the slavery was abolished?
In the UK,
Uh-huh.
I believe it was in 1834. That was in England, and then it was in the British Empire. It was a few years later. But by that point, the US was independent, so their own slavery, abolition of slavery was later, a few years, like the 1860s in the US. When was it abolished in the Spanish Empire? Do you know? I guess here in Colombia, when Colombia became independent, was slavery already abolished, or did it still exist?
I don't know.
In Popayán was in 1823 approximately.
23? Okay. So before Colombian independence. So before Colombia's independence from Spain.
No, it was 22nd.
1810, no? Began because killed someone like archiduque.
Yeah.
Archiduque, I don't say the word in English, but it doesn't make sense really
No.
deep, and it's so I don't know.
Well, I think in the case of World War One, that you basically had like a lot of alliances. The idea was that to always have a balance of power. So by always having two big alliance blocks against each other, like one big alliance and one big alliance, no one could go to war because they knew they couldn't win. Unfortunately, it turned out to be bullshit. So they did. Yeah. So when the guy was killed, that was like the trigger, in my opinion. So he was killed, and then.
Okay. Hi, Oli, ya lo saludo. Ay. Hola, bueno, tengo ahorita otra clase de inglés con Miss Dorian, así que eso fue todo, familia, nos estamos viendo. Creo que esta clase, yo estoy grabando algunas clases de las que ahorita voy a tener, pero otras las he grabado y el audio no lo he podido grabar. Entonces no sé si ahorita voy a poder grabar la clase que voy a tener, porque tengo, o sea, lo estoy haciendo desde el celular. Entonces, bueno, vamos a ver. No siendo más, eso fue todo por esta clase, familia. Cambio y fuera, espero les haya sido útil o les sea útil si eventualmente ven esto. Y eso es todo. Bye bye. Your partner in crime of languages, Ángeles se despide. Cambio y fuera. Ahora sí, mi gente. Ay.